On the line with us is Sam Smith. He's a journalist and editor with Progressive Review. That's ProRev, PROREV.com, the Progressive Review. Author of several books. And his Twitter is @ProRev. And fascinating piece, how the Koch brothers helped dismantle the Democratic Party. Sam, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you very much, Tom. Glad to be with you.
Thanks for joining us. So how did the Koch brothers help dismantle a Democratic Party?
Well, this is a story. It sort of stunned me that you were interested in it because I've been working on aspects of the story for over 20 years and nobody's been interested. But if you go back all the way to 1988, there was a group that was formed called the Democratic Leadership Council.
This was Al Fromm's group, right? Al Fromm and Bill Clinton.
Right. And the idea was to move the Democratic Party to the right. And it worked with people like, at the same time, Pamela Harriman was having over nearly 100 meetings with people who paid $1,000 a head to come to them to discuss who the candidates should be in 1992. And she raised about $12 million. But meanwhile, the Democratic Leadership Council was working on aspects of how you make the Democratic Party more conservative. And what I didn't learn until earlier this year was that one of the people who had helped fund it in the early period was Koch Industries with the Koch Brothers. And this sort of stunned me because while I expected some of the more conservative businesses that did both sides to do it, I thought that the Koch brothers were pretty firmly in the Republican camp. So that was sort of
I think they'll go wherever they can buy a politician, won't they?
That's right. I think that's true. I think I had underestimated their willingness to buy people.
Yeah. So the Democratic Leadership Council, this was, my understanding of it is that this thing was created in the late Reagan years, 87, 88.
Yeah.
That Al Fromm played a major role in it, at least according to his own book.
Right.
And that basically it was, correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding, and I have not yet finished reading Al Fromm's book, so I'm just only kind of halfway into this, but that basically they were saying, the labor unions, which were, a quarter to a third of the American workforce when Reagan came into office, just 8 years later had been, decimated. They're down to, they're from 25% of our workforce down to 7% now.
Right.
So there was no longer a reliable source of money for Democratic candidates. And so the rationale was, well, let's find some industries that are not, tobacco necessarily, that aren't too reprehensible, and get in bed with them. And the banks seemed like a nice, clean business. Do I have that wrong, Sam?
No, I think that's a good description of what was happening, and this was all going on, and it was basically ignored by the media, in large part, and one of the problems was that this was sort of an early period. We now understand the incredible influence that industrial and corporate money has on our campaigns, but at the time we didn't really.
Right.
I remember giving a talk outside the Capitol in which I tried to describe what was going on as bribery. And I said that if you wanted to adopt these same principles in your own life, I would advise you against giving a policeman $25 when he stops you and saying this is just a contribution.
Right.
Because we have developed a completely different standard for the role of industry.
Although just before the New York Police Department really cracked down hard on the Occupy movement, Jamie Dimon and his bank gave, $4.5 million or something like that to the New York Police Benevolent Association.
Right.
So apparently if you're rich enough, you can still do it. You can still give money to the cops and buy their behavior. But I'm astonished by this. The DLC still exists. Harold Ford Jr. is the head of it right now. Do I have that right?
I think that I'm not sure what its exact status is. I think it has kind of faded. I think because it's done its work. And when Obama came along, what was interesting was that he was in part a favored target of the DLC. But they, at that point, had had enough negative publicity. They didn't want that really known. And so that they sort of faded from the scene.
So is Obama an anti-DLC Democrat?
No. He was fine with them. I mean, he was one of their creations in part.
Right. So
but the thing was that there was enough. He was trying to present himself as far more liberal than he was.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, Bill Clinton campaigned with his New Covenant speech on reviving FDR's New Deal, and he never did any of that stuff.
Yeah.
And Obama campaigned on ending NAFTA.
One of the problems you got with this is that it's not just the media doesn't cover the present, but it doesn't cover the past.
Right.
And as a result, I happen to, my father worked in the New Deal, and I covered the Great Society, and I'm aware of this shift and how hard it is to get people to pay attention to. And let me just give you one little example, because I think it's so beautiful. In 1933, President Roosevelt, asked Frances Perkins to be his Secretary of Labor.
Right.
And she comes in with a piece of paper to the new incoming president of the United States, says, yes, I'll be your Secretary of Labor as long as you support a 40-hour work week, a minimum wage, unemployment compensation, abolition of child labor, Social Security, and universal health insurance. And Roosevelt went along. Can you imagine anybody doing that today?
Right. Well, I've read a variation of that, only the opposite, that after Bill Clinton was elected in 92, in early 93, a couple of weeks before his inauguration, Robert Rubin and Jamie Dimon and Alan Greenspan, as I recall, or maybe it was Larry Summers and Alan Greenspan and one of the banksters, sat him down and said, son, here's the facts of life, and you're not going to govern based on what you campaigned on.
Right.
Is that an apocryphal story, or is that true?
Of it, yeah. And the other thing is, I carry this around in my pocket because it so stuns people. But the Works Progress Administration of the New Deal helped to build or repair 2,500 hospitals, 2,500 sports arenas, 3,900 schools, 8,000 parks, 12,000 playgrounds, 124,000 bridges, and 125,000 public buildings. And we just have no concept of that being possible today.
Right. Yeah, it really, truly is astonishing. And in part because of the DLC that in part was funded by Koch Industries. And according to this article I read, there's a couple people from Koch Industries who were on the executive committee of the DLC. So
I'm not sure about that, but
is Hillary Clinton a DLC Democrat? Do we know?
Well, I don't know exactly. I think that they went with Obama. I think they were. That election was basically a choice between the establishment. They said, okay, it's time. We got to have either a woman or a black president. Right. And so Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama were the acceptable ones.
So to the DLC. To the
DLC, right.
Right, so
I think that...
and Bernie Sanders is probably not in the favor of the DLC.
No. And I think they really have faded, but they've done their work.
Yeah.
And the problem is, how do you turn that around? And, of course, Bernie Sanders is part of the story. My own feeling is that for labor unions, one of the things they could be doing is to create a labor equivalent of the AARP.
Yeah.
For people who are not unionized but who are workers.
Right. Well, the AFL-CIO has something like that. But, Sam, we're out of time. Hang on just a second.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Sam Smith, journalist, editor of the Progressive Review, the website ProRev, P-R-O-R-E-V, as in Progressive Review. Thank you, Sam.
Sure. Enjoyed it.
Great talking with you.
Take care.
To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.